Good morning.
Good morning, Father.
So yesterday when I said don't complain about this, I didn't mean don't complain about the details of it. I meant just don't complain that we're making a worthy place for the sacrifice of the Mass. So as you see, it's a work in progress, and the gold might be a little too gold. So got the darker color. Not going to do the dark. So the top right there is kind of the idea. There you get like a little bit of a patina look. The gold still comes through. You can talk to me after. Don't talk to me after Mass. Talk to Flo. Okay, Flo's the interior decorator. But just as we want to make a worthy place for the worship of God in the Holy Mass, so too, as Jesus says, do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've come to fulfill, right? Jesus fulfills the Old Testament, and that includes the worship of the Old Testament. The worship of the Old Testament is very detailed and very prescribed by God how he is to be worshipped. And it is through the sacrifice in the temple that he is worshipped. And so now in the new and everlasting covenant, it is through the sacrifice of Calvary that God is worshipped. It is through his own sacrifice that he receives adoration and praise and glory. And so we look and we recognize, okay, the Old Testament had an altar, the New Testament has an altar. The Old Testament had an oblation, that which is sacrifice. The New Testament does as well. The Old Testament had vestments and priests, as does the New Testament. The Old Testament had incense. The Old Testament had chant. So too does the New Testament. And so in our worship of God in the Holy Mass, we recognize that we're not doing something different from what has been done always to worship God. We recognize that we're doing something more perfect, right? That worship has been fulfilled. That those signs... Apparently. That the signs of worship in the Old Testament, peals of thunder, I think, sometimes it says in there, right? Let everything in heaven praise the Lord. But that those signs from the Old Testament, they remain, right? Except they have meaning now. They have fulfillment, right? So Jesus says, I haven't come to do away with the law. I haven't come to abolish the law. And a lot of times that kind of, we can see that in all aspects, right? Morality, very, very much so in morality. Jesus hasn't come to abolish the law, he's come to fulfill it. And the law gives us freedom, the law gives us the ability to do that which is right. Before Mass, Deacon Stephen was complaining to me that now that Lake Ackworth Road is open all the way with all 4 lanes, that it's 35 miles an hour, which is stupid, and that the Ackworth PD are out there with the speed trap already, because it's a 4-lane road. It should be at least 45. Everybody knows that. But poor Deacon Stephen said he almost got pulled over. And we're not going to, but we recognize that the law there, that law that exists is for the safety of the people, right? It makes more sense that it's 35 as opposed to 65, because if it were 65, that would be crazy, because people would be going 75. So the law is that it's 35, right? And it's the police's job to enforce that law, because it is for the good of the people, it is for the good of society, right? Maybe you think it could be gooder, but ultimately, it is for the good of society. It is for the good and protection of people. So, the law of the Old Testament is fulfilled in Jesus Christ. The law of the Old Testament is fulfilled in the teachings and in the preaching and in the mission and in the ministry of Jesus Christ. And so we recognize that the laws that surround us are there to protect us, right? If we think about morality, it's been this 5,000-year-old code of Judeo-Christian morality. And when the world tries to unravel it, and when the world tries to reinvent it, and when the world tries to make new things, right, and say, no, this is morality now. This is not everything that people believed for thousands of years, but the things that, just like for the last 5 minutes, we've been believing, this is morality. People get hurt. People get hurt. And so the moral law of the church, the natural law that we can know just as being human beings, that Jesus has fulfilled, right? That Jesus has made life even more life-giving. Those laws are to be respected because they are there, because they lead us to holiness. And so Jesus isn't just this excuse for freedom and to do whatever you want, but rather he calls us to look to the law and say, even more so, do what is commanded. Even more so, follow the teachings, follow the moral law, so that we may all be holy and we may all end up in the presence of Christ in heaven.